The fake injury report that everyone believed. Joel Embiid's season appeared to be over in a matter of seconds, and the scariest part wasn't the headline. It was how believable the headline felt. A post suddenly began circulating online, claiming Embiid had suffered another torn meniscus and could miss the entire 2026-27 season. The account looked like it belonged to NBA insider Shams Charania. The wording looked official. The timing felt terrifyingly realistic. Within minutes, Sixers fans were staring at what seemed like another catastrophic chapter in a career already defined by battles with injury. Then came the twist. The report was fake. According to the source material, the post came from an impersonator account designed to resemble Charania's real profile. Embiid had not suffered the season-ending meniscus tear described in the viral claim. That should have been the end of the story. Instead, it exposed something far more uncomfortable. Why did so many people believe it immediately? Because with Joel Embiid, another major injury no longer sounds impossible. It sounds familiar. Since winning MVP in 2022-23, Embiid's availability has become one of the biggest uncertainties surrounding Philadelphia. The source describes season after season interrupted by knee problem, surgeries, rehabilitation, minutes, restrictions, and new physical setbacks. That is what made the fake headline so powerful. It did not invent the fear, it exploited a fear that was already there. Philadelphia has built enormous championship expectations around Embiid at his best. He remains one of basketball's most dominant forces, a massive scorer who can punish defenders inside, operate from the perimeter, draw contact, protect the rim, and completely change how opponents prepare. But superstar talent means very little from the sideline, and that has become the nightmare surrounding this entire Sixers era. The question is no longer simply whether Embiid can dominate. We already know he can. The question is whether his body can give Philadelphia enough healthy basketball when the games matter most. That distinction changes everything. Roster construction, minute, contracts, playoff strategy, even how Philadelphia should define Embiid's role moving forward. The viral post was fake, the anxiety surrounding it was very real, and once you look at what Embiid's body has actually endured since his MVP season, the truth becomes far more complicated than anything an impersonator account could manufacture. Because Philadelphia does not need a fake injury report to have a Joel Embiid problem. The real medical history is already enough. So where are you watching from? If you believe Philadelphia should still build its championship plan around Embiid, come on. If you believe the Sixers need a completely different strategy because of his availability concerns, come on, and subscribe to the channel. Because next we're separating the viral fiction from the injury history that made everyone believe it in the first place. The real story is worse than the fake headline. The fake report disappeared quickly. The real problem did not. Once the impersonator account was exposed, Sixers fans could breathe again. Joel Embiid had not suffered the season-ending torn meniscus described in the viral post, but that relief lasted only as long as it took to look back at what had actually happened to him over the previous several seasons. According to the source, Embiid's health problems had already become a pattern long before the fake tweet appeared. Since his 2022-23 MVP season, his availability had dropped dramatically, with repeated knee trouble, procedures, restrictions, and other physical setbacks limiting how often Philadelphia could rely on him. That is why the fake post spread so fast. It fit the pattern. Nobody had to convince Sixers fans that another major Embiid injury was possible. They had already watched real ones happen. The source traces a brutal sequence: left knee problems, surgery, another difficult season, further procedures, soreness in the opposite knee, un oblique issue, a shin stress reaction, and later an emergency appendectomy. One injury does not automatically predict another, but the accumulation changes how everybody reacts. When Embiid was younger, an injury update felt temporary. Now every update feels like a referendum on the entire Sixers championship window. That is the shift. The question is no longer, how soon will Embiid be back? It is, how many times can Philadelphia keep resetting around the same problem? Because when healthy, Embiid still looks like a superstar. That is what makes this so painful. This is not a player who clearly lost the ability to dominate. It is a player whose body has repeatedly interrupted that dominance. And there is a massive difference between decline and unavailability. Decline is predictable. You adjust your expectations, you change the offense, you change the role. Unavailability is harder. You build a championship plan, then suddenly the centerpiece disappears. You protect him. He comes back, And then another issue appears. That is why the fake headline was almost too perfect. It was false information built on real fear. And the deeper you go into Embiid's actual injury history, the more obvious it becomes that Philadelphia's biggest problem has never been whether he is good enough. It has been whether his body will let him stay good long enough. And the injury that changed the entire trajectory of this conversation came in 2024. That is where the real story began. The knee that changed everything. Joel Embiid's health story has always been complicated, but the left knee became the center of everything, according to the source. In February 2024, Embiid suffered a meniscus injury in his left knee after Jonathan Kuminga fell into him during a game. The Sixers later announced surgery, and Embiid was sidelined for an extended period. He eventually returned, but returning is not the same thing as being restored. That distinction became impossible to ignore. The old version of Embiid could play through stretches of the regular season like an unstoppable force. He could dominate possessions, carry enormous offensive responsibility, defend the paint, and absorb the physical punishment that came with being the center of everything Philadelphia did. After the knee injury, every appearance came with another question. How much is too much? The following season made the concern even worse. The source says Embiid was limited to just 19 games in 2024-25 before Philadelphia eventually shut him down. Another procedure followed in April 2025, described as an arthroscopic surgery designed to address the ongoing issues in the same knee. By that point, this was no longer a normal injury recovery story. It had become a cycle: rehab, optimism, return, setback, more treatment, more optimism. Another setback, and every cycle costs something: conditioning, rhythm, chemistry, trust. For a franchise built around one superstar, trust may be the most important thing of all. Not personal trust, basketball trust. Can the coach design a playoff rotation assuming Embiid will be there? Can the front office spend aggressively around him? Can teammates build habits around a center who may miss large stretches? Can an offense still revolve around him if the team has to prepare for long periods without him? Those questions did not exist when Embiid was simply dealing with isolated injuries. They became unavoidable once the same knee kept coming back into the conversation. And that is why the next comeback looks so different. Philadelphia did not just bring Embiid back. It brought him back under protection. His minutes were no longer treated like normal playing time. They became something the team had to ration, and that may have been the clearest sign yet that the organization understood the old version of the Embiid era was changing. Philadelphia put its MVP inside a minutes cage. A former MVP being limited to around 20 minutes a night sounds almost absurd. For Philadelphia, it became survival. According to the source, when Embiid returned for the 2025-26 season, the Sixers placed him under strict minutes restrictions. Early on, his workload was held around 20 minutes, later increasing toward 25. That was not punishment. It was risk management. The team had already watched the left knee go through multiple procedures. The goal was no longer to maximize every regular season game. The goal was to make sure Embiid still existed physically when the season became important. And for short stretches, the strategy looked promising. The source describes Embiid still producing highly efficient numbers despite the restricted workload. He could score, rebound, protect the rim, and generate offense in limited minutes at a level most players would be thrilled to reach in full games. That is where Philadelphia's problem became almost cruel. Embiid could still look like Embiid, just not for as long. Imagine watching a former MVP dominate for 5 minutes, then seeing him go to the bench because the medical plan says that is enough. It changes how a team thinks. You stop asking how many points he can score. You start asking how many minutes you can afford to spend. Every appearance becomes an allocation decision. Use him now, save him for later, play the back-to-back, sit one out, let him practice, protect him from live work. The regular season becomes less about building rhythm and more about conserving a limited resource. And even with all that caution, the source says Embiid appeared in only 6 of Philadelphia's first 17 games during one early stretch. That number tells the real story. 20 points in 23 minutes looks great. 6 games out of 17 does not. That is the trap. Production makes you believe the superstar is still there. Availability reminds you the team cannot access him whenever it wants. Then, the situation became even more unsettled, because after Philadelphia spent years trying to protect the left knee, another problem appeared. This time, it was not the same knee. It was the other one, and that changed the tone immediately. Then, the other knee started hurting. Philadelphia had spent years worrying about Joel Embiid's left knee. Then, the right knee entered the conversation. According to the source, Embiid was added to the injury report with right knee soreness during the 2025-26 season. forcing him to miss a game against Boston. Nick Nurse told reporters the soreness surfaced around shoot-around and that doctors would review imaging before the team made any larger conclusion. That update sounded cautious. For Sixers fans, it felt terrifying because the left knee was supposed to be the known problem, the one being managed, the one Philadelphia had built protocols around when the right knee started hurting too. The fear became bigger than one joint. Now the question was about the entire body. Was Embiid compensating? Was the workload shifting stress elsewhere? Was this simply another unrelated issue? Nobody could know immediately, and that uncertainty was the problem. Nick Nurse did not give a dramatic prediction. He did not promise Embiid would be back immediately either. The source describes a wait-and-see posture centered on imaging and evaluation. That may be responsible medical communication, but to a fan base exhausted by years of injury timelines, we'll see. Can't sound worse than bad news. Bad news has shape, a diagnosis, a timetable, a treatment plan. Uncertainty just sits there. The right knee scare also forced Philadelphia to confront an uncomfortable reality. No minutes restriction can eliminate risk. You can reduce workload, skip back-to-backs, controlled practice, monitor every step, and something can still happen. That is the point where some observers around the league began changing the language they used about Embiid, not former MVP who needs to get healthy, something more serious. A superstar who may need to be treated differently forever. And once rival executives and analysts started saying that out loud, the conversation around Philadelphia changed because now the question was no longer whether Embiid could return to MVP form, it was whether the Sixers should even be asking him to. The NBA is starting to see Embiid differently. This may be the most important change in the entire story, not the surgeries, not the fake tweet, not even the minutes restrictions. The way people around the league started talking about Joel Embiid changed. According to the source, an Eastern Conference executive told ESPN that Philadelphia needed to figure out how to maximize Embiid rather than assume he could simply return to his old form and carry the offense the way he once did. That is a major shift. For years, the Sixers' strategy was simple: give Joel the ball, build around Joel, trust Joel to be the engine. Now the conversation becomes, how do you preserve Joel? That sounds subtle. It is not. It changes the entire hierarchy of a team. If Embiid cannot be expected to play 70 games, log heavy men, and dominate night after night, then Philadelphia has to design an offense that works without him, not as an emergency backup, as a permanent requirement. The source also includes commentary from Gilbert Arenas, who argued that age, physical wear, and the increasing pace of the modern NBA could all make Embiid's durability problem harder to solve over time. Reggie Miller is also described as supporting the logic behind Philadelphia's aggressive minutes management. That does not mean Embiid has become a role player. His production says otherwise. The source notes that even while restricted, he could still score at an elite rate. But the definition of value is changing. Old Embiid value, carry us for 35 minutes. New Embiid value, give us 25 dominant minutes and survive. That may actually be Philadelphia's smartest path. The problem is that championship teams normally want certainty from their best player. Philadelphia has the opposite. The highest ceiling on the roster may also be the biggest variable, and that becomes even more dangerous when the franchise goes all in on a short championship window. Because according to the source's scenario, Philadelphia did exactly that. LeBron James arrived. Suddenly, patience disappeared. The Sixers were no longer managing Embiid for some undefined future. They were managing him against a clock. LeBron arrives, and suddenly the clock is ticking. Joel Embiid's health problem would be difficult under any circumstances. Add LeBron James, and it becomes urgent. According to the source's scenario, Philadelphia assembled a win-now roster featuring Embiid, LeBron James, Tyrese Maxey, Jaylen Brown, and Fije Edgecombe, with LeBron joining on a 2-year deal. 2 years? That changes everything. A young rebuilding team can wait. A veteran contender cannot. If Embiid needs another season to fully recover, Philadelphia may not have another season to give him. If year one gets lost to injuries, one of the most expensive championship windows in the league becomes dramatically smaller overnight. That is why every Embiid update suddenly carries more weight. A sore knee is not just a sore knee, it is time disappearing. A missed week is not just 7 days. It is part of a 2-year bet, and LeBron's presence also changes how Philadelphia can use Embiid. In theory, This roster should allow the Sixers to reduce his burden. Maxey can create, Brown can score and defend. LeBron can organize possessions and control the game. Embiid should not have to carry the same offensive load he did during his MVP years. That could be the solution. Instead of asking Embiid to be the entire system, make him the most dangerous piece inside a larger system. Fewer minutes, fewer forced possessions, less regular season punishment. Save the dominant version for the games that matter most. Strategically, that makes sense. Emotionally, it is difficult because it requires accepting that the old Embiid era may be over, not the player. The role, the days of building every possession around him may need to end if Philadelphia wants the body to survive. And for a while, the plan seemed to work. The source describes a stretch where Embiid began producing close to 27 points per game, again over a larger sample. Suddenly, the old superstar seemed to be appearing more often. The gamble looked alive. Philadelphia could almost see the version of the season it had been waiting for. Then came the most frustrating twist imaginable. After years of managing the knee, the injury that interrupted everything had nothing to do with the knee at all. The comeback finally works until something nobody expected happens. For a few months, Philadelphia finally had reason to believe, according to the source, Embiid began rediscovering his rhythm during the 2025-26 season, eventually averaging around 26. 9 points and seven rebounds across 38 games. That was the version everyone had been waiting for. Not perfectly healthy, not playing every night, but productive enough to make the championship plan feel real again. The minutes management appeared to be working. Philadelphia was protecting the knee. Embiid was producing. The roster could imagine reaching the postseason with its star center still capable of changing games. Then April arrived, and the entire season changed because of something nobody had spent 3 years preparing for: appendicitis. According to the source, Embiid was initially ruled out with what was described as an illness before being diagnosed with appendicitis and undergoing an emergency appendectomy in Houston. Think about the cruelty of that timing. Philadelphia spent years worrying about one knee, then the other knee, then workload, then recovery, then conditioning. Then the injury that threatened the playoff push came from an organ unrelated to basketball. There was nothing the Sixers could have load managed about it. No minute restriction prevents appendicitis. No rehab protocol predicts it. It was simply bad timing. And yet the outcome looked painfully familiar. Embiid unavailable. Philadelphia scrambling. The postseason approaching. Again, that is what made the situation so psychologically exhausting for the franchise. The specific reasons kept changing. The result kept looking the same. Missed games, lost rhythm, uncertain availability when the season mattered most. The source says Embiid finished that season with 38 appearances. That was an improvement from 19, but still less than half a full 8-2 game schedule. And that number joined the previous seasons like another piece of evidence. Different injuries, same availability problem. At that point, Philadelphia could no longer treat the situation as temporary bad luck. It had to become part of the business plan. And that is where the money makes everything even more complicated. Because Embiid is not simply an injured star. He is an injured star tied to one of the largest guaranteed commitments on the roster. $248 million and a decision Philadelphia cannot escape. This is where basketball becomes business. According to the source, Joel Embiid was still owed roughly $248 million in guaranteed money across the remaining years of his contract. That number changes the entire conversation. Philadelphia cannot simply say, he gets hurt too much, let's move on. Not realistically, not easily, not without enormous consequences. The Sixers are financially committed, but they are also competitively committed, and those two commitments do not always point in the same direction. The old strategy was built around a simple assumption: if Embiid is healthy, Philadelphia has a championship-level centerpiece. The new reality is more complicated. Embiid may still be championship level when he plays, but the franchise cannot assume he will always be available. That means Philadelphia's roster has to solve two problems at once. How do we maximize Joel Embiid? And how do we survive without Joel Embiid? Those are not the same question. The source discusses league mechanisms that can exist in extreme injury situations, including cap relief concepts, but it also makes clear that Embiid does not fit neatly into a simple career-ending injury category. He is still playing, still producing, still capable of looking dominant. That almost makes the problem harder. If he were clearly finished, the decision would be painful but obvious. If he were clearly healthy, the strategy would be obvious too. Instead, Philadelphia lives in the middle, too talented, to abandon, too fragile to trust completely. That is organizational limbo, and LeBron's short-term presence makes the limbo even more expensive. The Sixers cannot spend 3 more seasons figuring this out slowly. The championship window is happening now. That should force a philosophical change. Stop treating Embiid's availability as a surprise. Plan for it. Build lineups that function without him. Let Maxey and the other creators carry more regular season responsibility. Use Embiid selectively. Reduce unnecessary wear. If he misses games, the offense should bend, not break. That may sound like lowering expectations. It is actually the opposite. It is accepting reality in order to give Philadelphia the best possible chance to win. Because the biggest danger is not that Embiid has lost his talent. The source repeatedly shows that he has not. The biggest danger is building a championship plan that still depends on him being physically available like he was years ago. That version of the plan has already failed too many times. And that leaves one final question before the story can be judged. Not whether Joel Embiid can still dominate, not whether the fake injury report was wrong, not even whether Philadelphia should trade him. The real question is whether the Sixers can finally stop asking Embiid to be everything and still win a championship with what remains. The most dangerous question isn't whether Embiid is still great. The most dangerous question surrounding Joel Embiid is no longer whether he can still dominate an NBA game. The real question is whether Philadelphia can still build a championship plan. That depends on his body cooperating when the season matters most. According to the source, even after multiple knee procedures, strict minutes restrictions, and repeated interruptions, Embiid still produced at a high level when available. During the comeback described in the material, he averaged roughly 26, 9 points and 7 rebounds across 38 games. That tells Philadelphia something important. The talent is not the biggest problem. The dependency is. For years, the Sixers operated under one basic philosophy. If Embiid is healthy, give him the responsibility and let the former MVP carry the franchise. That strategy now needs to evolve. Philadelphia should no longer spend the regular season trying to prove Embiid can survive superstar workloads. The objective should be getting the most valuable version of him to the postseason. That means accepting fewer minutes, more scheduled rest, more responsibility for Tyrese Maxey and the other creators described in the source's roster scenario, and most importantly, building an offense capable of surviving when Embiid is unavailable. That is not giving up on him. It is adapting to reality. Because the Sixers have already seen what happens when everything depends on Embiid being available. One knee becomes a problem, then surgery, then another procedure, then the opposite knee becomes sore. Then, just when the comeback finally appears to be working, something completely unpredictable like appendicitis arrives. Different setbacks, same consequence. Philadelphia loses its centerpiece. And with the enormous guaranteed commitment to Embiid described in the source, the franchise cannot simply pretend the problem will disappear. The smarter strategy is to stop building around the assumption of perfect health, build around uncertainty. If Embiid gives Philadelphia 25 dominant minutes, maximize those 25 minutes. If he misses games, the system must continue functioning. If he reaches the playoffs healthy, then unleash everything that remains. There is also a human lesson inside this story. Injuries should never become ammunition for mocking an athlete. Embiid did not choose surgeries, rehabilitation, or the frustration of repeatedly fighting his way back. And the fake injury report that opened this story showed exactly why verified information matters, a false headline spread, because people were already conditioned to expect another disaster. The report was fake. The concern was not, Embiid may never again provide Philadelphia with the physical certainty the franchise once expected from its superstar, but that does not mean his championship window is automatically closed. It means the Sixers must finally change the question. Stop asking, can Joel Embiid carry us? Start asking, how can we protect Joel Embiid long enough to help us win? That difference could decide everything. So if you believe Philadelphia can still win a championship with Embiid as a major centerpiece, if you believe the Sixers need to move toward a future that no longer depends on his availability, tell us where you're watching from. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, like the video, share it with another NBA fan, and subscribe to the channel for more NBA news, trades, player stories, and drama. Because Joel Embiid may still be great enough to win, the challenge is making sure he is healthy enough to be there when winning matters most.